Cars. Maybe kind of a funny topic to think of. What are you afraid of? But if you stop and think about it, there might be some of us that are afraid of certain aspects of cars. Maybe it's buying a car, going to the dealership, or buying from a private party, the financing, the maintenance. And then what about exotic cars? If you go to Vegas, is it a good idea to rent a Ferrari for a couple days? Back in 1985, I was the kid at 10 years old that had two posters on my wall. One was a white Lamborghini Countach, and the other one was a red Ferrari Testarossa. And these are two cars that I've never seen in person. I had the opportunity to ride in a Ferrari once, but it wasn't a Testarossa. But one of the reasons I'm so excited about today's show is our guest has certainly ridden in a Ferrari, owns a Ferrari, has owned Lamborghinis, and is probably the most knowledgeable person about cars that I have ever come across when I found him on YouTube.
The What Are You Afraid Of podcast, hosted by Kagan Yoakum, starts now.
His name is Rob Ferretti. He has a very successful YouTube channel called Superspeeders Rob, a name bestowed upon some street racers in a news story, I believe. He also has a dream vacation company where you go to exotic places, kind of bucket list travel, and also have an exotic car when you're there. So the man has done a lot. Let's dial him up in New Jersey from here in Montana and meet Rob Ferretti.
Calling. You are now connected to the What Are You Afraid Of podcast.
Okay, Rob, are you there?
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? So is that an accurate way to kind of summarize your vast experience?
Yeah, you got most of it. The travel company, the bucket list travel company, is generally designed around people that have their own vehicles.
Okay.
That are just looking for fun and cool stuff to do. But other than that, the description was pretty accurate.
So what do people not quite get right about exotic cars and maybe owning or renting an exotic car?
I mean, there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to exotic cars, and a lot of it comes down to ego, which is sort of weird. And I just bought a Lamborghini Huracan yesterday, a brand new one. And it's funny how people approach dealerships. You wouldn't think to go in and get the best price. You walk in and how dare you? You're buying a Lamborghini. Why would you ever negotiate? So it's just funny how most people would approach things that they just don't know. Or like, oh, I'm only driving a Porsche. I'm only driving a BMW or something like that. Why would they let me test drive a car? And there seems to be a lot of like ego and a lot of the process of buying and selling cars. You can imagine the false interest for people that can't afford them that want to get behind the wheel. So the dealership is playing screener. So you essentially have to go in. It's sort of an intimidating process until you get on the other side of it. You walk into a dealership and you're like, all right, I genuinely want to buy a car, but the dealership is doing nothing but screening whether they genuinely think you can afford it or are actually interested, or if you're just there to sort of waste their time and go for a ride in a Ferrari.
So what did they kind of use for like a test question to sort of feel that out?
There's no like you've passed our test questions. It's all, I mean, especially in the sales game, you don't want to be, think of it, it's very ripe for that YouTube prank channel to show up pushing a shopping cart as a homeless guy and not buy a car and then have a Rolls Royce pick you up and drive you away outside and pretend like you could have bought the dealership.
Right.
So it really is how you present yourself, the questions that you ask, and then just if you present yourself as somebody who has no idea what they're talking about, that may hurt, that may help. There's just a million different ways. It's all salesperson feels. Remember, they want to sell the cars, but they also don't want to put unnecessary miles on the car. You don't want to have a car that somebody's interested in buying, but 130 people that weren't actually interested in buying it have test driven it already. So the thing now has 500 miles on it.
So instead of buying, what about renting? Like, if I go to Vegas, is it a smart idea if I want to rent a Ferrari for a day and kind of feel like a big shot, or what do you think about that?
I mean, it depends. Why you're renting is an individual decision. But as far as renting makes perfect sense for a lot of things. If you don't plan on carrying an asset think about doing work around your house. Why would you go out and buy a $400 power tool when you only need it for one day and you're likely never going to need it again? Now, it's $400, so a lot of people are like, yeah, whatever, maybe I'll use it another time. With a purchase decision like a car, that doesn't really come into play. And that's also a need versus a want. I think driving around in an exotic car is absolutely a want and not a need. Nobody needs to drive around in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini when they travel or when they go somewhere. But a lot of people turn that want into a need because they've experienced it or they've always wanted to experience it. So when you do show up, you're faced with a plethora of options, especially Vegas. Vegas has track experiences, they have on-road experiences, and they have rentals. So you could do any of those. And the thing you run into is the varying price points. And Vegas is a great market study because a lot of people go to Vegas to have fun. You may travel to Miami, but you're going to go to the beach and go to the restaurants and the hotels. Vegas, you're there to live it up, so to speak. So it's an excellent location and one of the very few locations that can support the different types of business that are sustained year round with as many people that are doing it in the exotic car space. Now, when you get there, you'll see cars ranging from a couple $100 for a few hours to $4,000 a day. You have to use your common sense as far as where that value equation is for you. Obviously, the more expensive the rentals or the better companies, you'll be paying more, but you'll be getting a better product and better service. If you're spending $300 to drive a Ferrari for a few hours, you can imagine that business model looks incredibly different, and then the car is not going to be as quality or presentable or even as reliable as the other ones. You're probably going to get a used car with a bunch of miles on it that is questionably maintained. But not even questionably maintained, but like it's harder to keep up on the maintenance when you're running a carousel where the one guy comes, the next guy comes an hour later. You can't schedule that out to get maintained or looked at. If somebody whacks something on the road, you can't put it up and do a full inspection on it because you don't really have time. You just have to send it out and then whatever happens. So there are these questions that you have to answer, whether you and you could get a great value if you go into one of these cheap companies and you get a car that they just put in the fleet, you win. But most of the cars are not. You generally can't dictate what you're getting. It's usually you get what you pay for.
$5,000 oil change. Like, why do people think that a Ferrari is going to cost $5,000 to have an oil change? It's
just like a popular misconception. People, and part of the things about Ferraris, for so long they weren't very reliable. So people enjoyed that aspect of it because it was a status thing. It wasn't necessarily it was the best performing car. They look good and they sound pretty good, but they were not reliable, and it was expected that they weren't to be reliable. So half of the ownership was like, yeah, my Ferrari's in the shop. I just spent $3,000 to check the tire pressures. And it was more of a bragging right. And when you have that customer who just likes to brag about how much money things cost, there's no check. There's no checkpoint. Nobody wants to there's no competition. And once people are like, well, it shouldn't cost $3,000 for an oil change. You shouldn't have to take the engine out. And there's never been like a $3,000 oil change. It's usually the oil change turns into, oh, yeah, by the way, this is bad too, this is bad too, this is bad too. So whereas your car was fine and you drove it in for an oil change, you drive out $3,000 or $5,000 later after you fix everything else that they say is broken that they might as well fix while they're in there.
Okay. So maybe people are afraid of, getting pulled over by law enforcement. I mean, it seems like a lot of the exotic cars, especially in a group, are sort of a magnet for police to watch.
I mean, that's a two-part thing. Yes, driving an exotic car does make you more conspicuous, and yes, driving a lot of exotic cars makes you much more conspicuous. But when you get a lot of these cars together, you tend to get that group mentality that like, oh, we're all here. What are the odds that one cop is going to pull more than one of us over? The odds are in our favor. Let's go. And you get people driving much more aggressively than they should, and then that warrants the police attention. So it's not necessarily just driving along in a Ferrari will get you pulled over. Yes, it is more likely to get you pulled over than driving along in a Prius at the same speed, but also you're generally going to drive a Ferrari or a Lamborghini faster than a Prius when the opportunity permits. But it's harder to blend in. So it's a double-edged sword, as I said, that yes, driving in a group is much more conspicuous because there's a lot of people, but the groups aren't necessarily innocent usually. Usually when you're driving in a large group of exotic cars or sports cars in general, you tend to get a bunch of people horsing around, and that does justify the police attention that it does receive.
I always liked how you dealt with law enforcement, though, on your videos. I mean, you tried the cowboy hat once to prove that you were a local. But what's your advice for, if you get pulled over in whatever car, what's your advice for dealing with law enforcement?
I mean, there's no, you don't have to reveal anything that you were doing that the cop may not have seen. If they say, you know how fast you were going, you're not going to be like, 117. It doesn't make any sense you say, I don't know how fast I was going. Why don't you tell me how fast you caught me going, or that you measured my speed at?
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to self-incriminate yourself, because a lot of the times if you're guilty, people tend to just feel guilty and then apologize and self-incriminate themselves, and then it's a really easy ticket to write. So, and then just realize the cop is just out there doing his job. It's not like he's got something personal against you. It's not, because of the color of your skin or because of the car you're driving or because you've got more money than him potentially, that he's got some vendetta against you. And sure, maybe 1% of the time that's true, but most of the time it's not. He's just out there doing his job. If somebody's doing something that warrants getting pulled over or a citation, he's commencing the stop. That's why he's there. He's there to patrol and enforce. And when he pulls you over, you just have to recognize that he's probably got the same girlfriend, kids, wife, whatever that you do. You guys are in different career paths or different lifestyles. So it shouldn't be anything where there should be animosity towards that. The guy's really just doing his job. And when you don't get all nervous about it and like, oh, what's good, like, and just treat him like another guy, like a guy you just walked into, which is what I do. And the even if you get a ticket or you don't get a ticket, the interaction seems to go much more smoothly.
So tell us about your YouTube channel. I mean, you have so many things going on, but you are really dedicated to that channel. And where can people find your channel and kind of hear some more of these stories?
Sure. If you go on YouTube and just type in Superspeeders or Superspeeders Rob, even just my name, Rob Ferretti, it'll come up, obviously. I've been doing this for a long time. I started making DVDs back in like 2002, and just as DVDs started phasing out, I just transitioned to more of the video on demand content on YouTube. So I mix that in with my other businesses, and I enjoy it. I do it because I enjoy it, and I enjoy the interaction, and I enjoy people finding it entertaining. So if you would like to find it entertaining or already do find it entertaining, by all means, check out the channel and watch some videos.
Well, I certainly do, and I really appreciate your time to spend a couple of minutes with us out here on the show. I'm definitely a fan of the channel, and I hope other people will go out and check it out as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Have a good day.
You got it.
This program is based in Missoula, Montana, and is produced by Gravity Media Productions. To learn, connect, and discover more, Visit gravitymediapro.com